Buongiorno signore e signori, benvenuti al MASI per questo nostro Artist Talk, Meet the Artist and also Meet Serpentine. Vorrei innanzitutto ringraziare tutti quelli che hanno collaborato non solo alla mostra ma anche a questo evento, la squadra tecnica di REC e poi il nostro dipartimento comunicazione con Sara Greenwood, Laura Pomari e Sara Tua, anche Giorgia Maffioli Brigatti e anche evidentemente le due curatrici, c'è la Ludovica Introini e Francesca Bernasconi che hanno curato la mostra qui. Dunque, è un piacere di presentarvi i nostri ospiti di questa sera. Con James ci collegheremo tra un attimo, lui è a Londra, ha 93 anni, quindi si scusa che non gli è stato possibile di arrivare in persona, ma lo vedremo tra un attimo in Zoom. Prima, per introdurre un po' la mostra e l'artista, abbiamo con noi Ulrich Obrist, direttore artistico della Serpentine, abbiamo Lizzie Carey-Thomas, che era la curatrice della mostra, e Konaté, era la co-curatrice di questo progetto. Quindi grazie a voi tutti, grazie all'invito di partecipare a questo progetto. La mostra è stata presentata a Londra l'anno scorso, dopo Lugano partirà per Detroit, andrà al Detroit Art Institute a Detroit. Quindi the floor is yours. Welcome, and we're looking forward to an interesting conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tobias. We are very grateful to you and your amazing team here at MASI Lugano. It was an amazing experience for Lizzie, for Ava, for myself, and of course for James to work with you all. And I think before we start, we should all give another big round of applause to Tobias and the dream team of the MASI Lugano. Now, the story of this exhibition, and we are very fortunate to have actually the two curators with us today, Lizzie Carey-Thomas and Ava Konaté, who could tell us much, much more about the artists, who can tell us everything you always wanted to know about James Barnor. And we also actually going to have James with us in a few minutes. He's going to join the event today by video conference from London. As you know, James is now in his 90s, and whilst he remains very active, it is occasionally very difficult for him to travel, but we do hope that during the exhibition, maybe over the next couple of months, it will be possible for him to visit Lugano. But he was involved really in all the details of this retrospective from the very beginning. And it really began when we saw an exhibition in New York, actually curated by the artist David Hart, and it's actually not a coincidence that this show was curated by an artist, because often, the most exciting shows are curated by artists. It was a very astonishing exhibition bringing together James Barnor's work with Liz Adler-Johnson, but with also photographers from the US. And there was, for example, a very interesting connection between James Barnor and Christopher Williams. And I was immediately curious to know more about this artist. And then we found out that he's actually based in London, and arranged a studio visit. And during this studio visit, we became aware that there is an archive of more than 30,000 images, which actually James has done, and we kind of really felt this very urgent that this work can be seen by a wider audience, and that there would be, for the first time, a bigger museum retrospective in London. There have been exhibitions in London at Autograph and October Gallery previously, over the years, but there had never been a big, museum exhibition. And so over really 2 years, we started to work with James and started to work also on a catalog, which is a collaboration with Tobias and with the MASI here, a catalog designed by Markel Katrib, to whom we're very grateful, with texts actually by Christine Barth, by David Adje, by David Hart, who of course curated this show in New York, by Alicia Nock, and also actually a very personal recollection from Erlin Ibreck. So for those of you who want to know more, you can find all of this information in the book which was published. We are also very grateful, of course, as always, to the Serpentine CEO, to Bettina Korek, as well as to Izomi Umulo and the whole teams at the Serpentine. We are also very grateful to Clémentine de la Ferronnière and Isabelle Senuta from the James Barnor archives, who have over the last years started to digitize these tens of thousands of images, which is of course incredibly important, because until not such a long time ago, many of these photos were really, in a cupboard and under the bed, in James's, small apartment. And it's so important that all of this work is now digitized. Actually, the exhibition is really about the many decades of James's work, and it focuses on the period of 1950 to 1980, where you can see how James actually recorded major social and also political changes in both Accra and London. And what is so amazing is that his long trajectory includes family snapshots, commissioned portraits, and also commercial assignments. And of course, this whole archive part, is a very important part actually is a very important part of the exhibition. And you will see in the show there is photographs, but there is of course also important aspects of the archive. The important thing about James is that he really became part of a very historic moment. He started, of course, with studio photography, but he very early on wanted to go beyond the studio, and that was very unusual at the time, right? So with a portable camera, he would go into Accra. He would actually photograph also a lot of sports. He would photograph a lot of social events, and through that, more and more, connected to politics. You'll hear more about that from Lizzie and Ava, and actually became really the photographer who documented in such a historic way the independence of Ghana. And he also, of course, then moved to London. And what is very, very important is these different worlds he sort of brought together, because when he actually moved to London, he started to also do fashion photography. And of course, it's that work, James as a fashion photographer, which inspires so many young photographers today. For example, the eminent American photographer Tyler Mitchell always credits James really to be somehow his great influence. James then, after spending time in London, went back actually to Accra and started there the first color photography lab, actually, and that became another very important moment for him. And then in '94, permanently actually returned to London, where he has lived ever since. I think it's important that we can also emphasize the generosity of James, not only as a photographer and as an artist, but also as somebody who supports practitioners in many different fields. And he actually, in terms of supporting, music, has also been instrumental as a music producer, and has done work in that field, and of course also used his photography for amazing record covers. And before now handing over to Lizzie and Ava, we might actually ask James now maybe to join us, because I know that we were working on the connection. Hi, James. Hi, James. How are you?
Fine.
We are so happy to see you. Another warm welcome to James Barnor.
I'm so pleased to see you with my French beret on, with my French hat. So tell me if you like it. If not, I'll change into a Ghanaian one.
No, we are so happy to see you. It's great. And actually, James, we're now going to have introductions from Lizzie and from Ava. We're going to then also have questions for you. So I suggest, Lizzie, that maybe you begin. He'll reappear.
No, before 1 minute, I read a letter asking me if I knew Bill Bell.
Exactly, because we have Willy Spiller here, and
It's another story altogether. We can have a 1 hour chat on that alone. So
Yeah.
don't forget.
No, we'll do that at the end, James, because we have Willy Spiller here, the great Swiss photographer, and actually Willy asked me this question last night, so he'll ask you at the end of the talk. We'll come to that. This is very exciting.
Good. It's nice, to remember my old friend Bill Bell.
Wonderful. Lizzie?
Hello, James, again. How are you? Nice to see you.
Fine. Thank you. I'm all right.
Good. I'm just going to say a little introduction because I think most people want to hear you speak today. And before handing over to Awa, I was going to give a little overview of the exhibition, but I think Hans Ulrich's already done that, so he's saving me some words. I wanted to talk a little bit about the process of making the exhibition with you and how it really unfolded through a long series of conversations that began about 2 years ago, pre-pandemic. We first met at Serpentine, and then continued through many visits to your flat in Brentford, West London. And then, obviously, we had to find a way to continue those conversations when we went into lockdown, and we managed to connect via Zoom and continue our meetings, and then before re-establishing in real life meetings again. And it was such an extraordinary experience because, of course, every single image in your archive opens up a whole world of connections, and your memory for the detail of each particular situation is extraordinary. It's pin sharp. And that made selecting the show a huge challenge because there was no quick way to move through the selection. So you would be simultaneously going through your archive, which had been newly digitized, specifically seeking out images that you remember taking that were important to you, but also rediscovering images that you'd forgotten about. And so as I was going through them, you were also going through them and sending me emails and text messages. Every morning there would be a host of images plopping into my inbox that absolutely had to be in the exhibition. And the other thing I think is really notable is that for you, it doesn't matter the circumstances under which you were taking the images, whether it was a family snapshot or a studio portrait or a commission in your role as the first photojournalist in Ghana. Every image was as important as every other image, which also made the selection quite challenging. But I think it's very telling of the fact that it's about people for you. And you often say, people are more important than places. It's about a lifetime of encounters and your relationships to those sitters and the collaboration, the collaborative process of actually taking those photographs. It's not about you training your camera at a sitter in a passive way. It's about a conversation. It's about your relationship. And I think that's why many of the images seem so intimate. You have a real ability to capture a particular personality and project it out into the world. There's often motion and movement in those images, people looking beyond the frame or in a process of, in mid-conversation or laughter. And I think that's also reflective of the fact that you are not ever separate from the world that you're documenting. You are part of the story. And so with the exhibition, we were trying to think about how to represent this sizable slice of history, which contains some really important historical moments, such as the independence of Ghana in 1957, which you photographed for Drum magazine and also for the Daily Graphic, and had a ringside seat on some of the most major players and events that were happening in the lead up to independence and the moment of independence and the celebration afterwards. But then also represent the figures that were most important to you in your life, some of whom are perhaps not public figures or haven't been until now. And then also primarily to try and make the show a visual exercise so that you could walk in and absorb as much information from the images themselves without any framework at all. So it was quite a complex process. And for you, I think it's probably correct to say that the sort of personal, professional are completely interwoven. There's no separation there. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit, James, about how obviously you are the bridge between the past and the present. And what was the experience like for you in revisiting this whole lifetime of work from the position of today, from the perspective of now? Obviously, you remember in much detail, you remember the circumstances of taking those images, the technical challenges you experienced on the day, your relationship to the sitter, what that person was doing, what their occupation was, where they are now, whether they're living or dead. And sadly, given your long life, many of those people have now passed away. But also there was an extraordinary process of reconnecting some of the people you're still in contact with, some you'd lost contact with, but still today we're finding people coming forward and saying and reintroducing themselves to you on the back of the exhibition, and you're reconnecting again now. So how was it for you, James, to look back on this whole body of work from the position of now and revisiting those memories?
Good morning, everybody. I have to take the chance to greet everybody, welcome everyone, and to, bring the sort of new life that my pictures are bringing to everybody. At the moment, I don't know what to say because a lot has gone on, and there are lots of signs showing that a lot more will go on. So I don't know where to start with. Honestly, you've spoken, you've said everything. You've said everything that there is to say. So I don't, know what to put in, except that this is only the beginning. Talking about relation with people, whether they are dead or not, and my relation with them or not. Two questions, the question about William Bell, and there was a question about the model holding the plastic bottles there. Somebody was talking about it, how do you come about it? And just yesterday, I am talking to the oldest or the living member of the Sikh Hagumaya staff in Ghana when I returned 1970 to establish the Color Lab. The only person that I know is living. And there's a nice lady doing her PhD research on my work. And she's in Ghana now, following up to check on some of the facts. And I'm introducing her to that man to tell her all what he knows about Akfagevet, James Barnor, arriving in Ghana to join their company and also to establish color, what went on. And I said, all I'm interested is to find the name of the lady holding the bottles, because honestly, I have forgotten her name. I didn't take her name, but I know she was an assistant to one of our shops. And he said, oh, no, not our shop, but somebody else's shop. That shows how lively this thing is. He knows where the person is, who was working with the person. So the fact that we are learning more, especially with this exhibition still going on, we are learning more that even in London, we didn't know to add, like the name of this lady and which shop, whether it was a Sikh Hagman shop or a co-worker's shop. That was yesterday. So I can only tell you I can only add 2 questions. So I wouldn't have to talk too much. Whatever means by which we start, I'll wait patiently for your questions and then answer as quickly or as precisely as I possibly can. Unfortunately, I'm the only one who can remember, and I'm on my own at the moment. You are lucky. You have all kinds of people, friends, but I'm alone as I talk. So I'll concentrate and talk to you as briefly as I can. So over to you.
In that case, James, I'm going to pick up on the theme of the colour processing lab, that you spent the 60s in London on assignment for drum and learning colour processing at Medway College of Arts, and then working for Colour Processing Laboratories, which was the leading colour processing lab in the country at the time. And then in 1970, you returned to Ghana to set up the first colour processing lab in the country, working for SICK Hagemeyer, which was a subsidiary of the photographic manufacturing company Agfa Gavert. And you left the UK at a time when you were doing incredibly well. You said you were at the height of your success, but you saw the opportunity to apply for this job and be trained, and you took it. Can you talk a little bit about why it was so important for you to bring colour processing and be part of this historic moment of bringing colour processing back to Ghana, or to Ghana for the first time?
When I arrived in London in 1960 or 59, I happened to bump into somebody called Dennis Kemp, one of the greatest photographers in London, who wasn't even known. He was an ex-serviceman, and when, after the war, he trained as a medical photographer, something that not many people know about. He did medical photography, but he was such a different person that whatever he was or he had, he didn't think of it. He thought more of what more he could do. This man was going to cover the independence celebration in Nigeria in October 1960. He worked for Kodak Limited, and he thought of doing some homework, and so went to the Ghana embassy to borrow films. And he was told about, somebody from Ghana called James Barnor. He's just arrived here. He wants a job. Can you help him? And that made a big difference in my life as a newcomer to Britain or to London. That time, things were hard, and it could have been, so hard that I might have to take a plane and return immediately I arrived. But my life changed when I met him, and it was through Dennis Kemp that, a lot of things happened. My going back with him to Nigeria to cover the independence, my convincing Dennis Kemp that what about going to Ghana? Ghana and Nigeria is just a stone throw. What about going to Ghana before returning to England? Said, okay. The result of that, then leaving him in Lagos to go and prepare for his visit to Ghana, the places that I arranged for him and what we did, and then our return to England. Now, it was Dennis Kemp that, or associating with him, we went to photographic exhibition where I saw color for the first time. All the 10 years that I studied and worked in Ghana, I never came across color at all. So when I went to Royal Albert Hall and saw an exhibition of real big color, I was excited. I went to the stand and I said, can I learn this? Can I learn how to do this? And it was the proprietor. I didn't know him, Mr. Cobley, at the time. He asked, where do you come from? I said, Ghana. Oh, do you know Mr. E.Q. Thompson? I said, yes. Mr. E.Q. Thompson was my friend. I photographed him before he came to England. Oh, then you can come. That's how my association with color came. And, I even like the story about how I was received, how I managed to mix up and so on, more than actually taking it to Ghana. Taking it to Ghana was a chance where, after doing so many things, now I had a hint that the photographic manager, the Ghanaian photographic manager of Sikh Hagemeyer, had died, and they needed a replacement. And the one who gave me hint said, apply, but don't apply to Ghana. Apply to Germany or England. And in fact, the whole thing revolved around there. And then this question of, I have learned something in England. I traveled to go and learn something. Now, what do I do? Take it back or live with it in England, where there are a lot more experts than me? One person, and we haven't got any other. In fact, in the whole of Africa, if anything, there wasn't any color specialist. And I was learning and working in the leading color processing laboratory in Britain. What should I do? So the proprietor, Mr. Cobley, who didn't want to lose me and yet thought I had left my family for too long, encouraged me and supported me to take the job and go back. And that's why I went back. What happened, there is another thing, but I think I stop here for another question. Sorry.
Thank you so much, James. And I actually think we have so many more questions, but maybe this is a nice moment to actually segue into Ava's presentation. And then I'm sure Ava will have also questions for you. And then Lizzie and I will have more. And then we'll have Willy Spiller's question. And then we'll have questions probably from more friends here in the room. So yeah, Ava, it would be great to hear from you because, of course, the exhibition has been very much a collaboration in terms of curation between the Serpentine's chief curator, Lizzie Carey-Thomas, and Ava Konaté, who is an independent curator based in Copenhagen and London. And for those of you who don't follow yet Ava on Instagram, it's very urgent you follow Culture Art Society, CAS, where you can see Ava's research about archives, which of course came very much also into the exhibition. So Ava, it would be great to hear from you.
Thank you, Hans-Ulrich. Can you all hear me? Or is my microphone off? Great. Hi.
I can hear you very clearly.
Nice to see you again, James.
Good.
Hi, everyone. I'm Awa Konaté, as Hans-Ulrich has introduced me as. I'm an independent curator working between Copenhagen and London and working primarily around lens-based work by African artists, so both continentally and within the diaspora as well. So I work mainly with photography and moving image. So I'm going to be... Sorry? Oh, okay, I think that was James. I'm going to be sort of talking about, I guess, my relation to the project, but also in relation to James, and sort of trying to go in different segues, but it will all lead back to James again. I think, from a perspective of this exhibition itself and thinking about the significance of archives and archives being so central to understanding the wider framework of this project, you kind of have to go...
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I just wanted...
What's going on? Okay. Just thinking about the relation and the history of photography really in Africa and thinking about this history and genealogy that James emerges out of. So I think to understand James's trajectory and to understand James's work and perhaps the wider lineages of the exhibition, we kind of have to go back to the history of photography on the African continent. So photography sort of comes into the African continent in the late 1860s, early 1870s, rather quite immediately after its invention here in Europe. And it comes into the continent via its contact and very intimate relationship with colonialism. So colonialists and colonial governments understood very quickly that photography was a very, very integral aspect of also trying to justify the colonial project. So there's a very, very violent history of a visual construction, but also narrative construction. But amidst that, of course, amidst that discourse and that history, you have in the 1860s and in the 1870s, African photographers even taking on the medium and working with that. So you have studios such as in Ghana with the Degrassi family, who actually created one of the first studios in the West African coast, going as far down as Angola, up until the early 1920s and 1930s. And Ghana, being a country that was quite central to understand colonial history, had also very, very particular history with photography because of colonialism, but also because of the way in which that local photographers were taking on the medium very quickly and trying to construct and build an industry for that. So James emerges out of a history of family members and of uncles who come from that history. And what I think is so significant to the project and understanding archive is that James emerges in the 1940s, but he comes from a history of that practice. And I think in its entirety, the exhibition was very interested in trying to, I guess, not position James as a singularity, as this photographer who emerges in the 1940s and then does all these great things, but trying to understand James in a wider breadth of a photographer who comes in with the medium, but then also tries to take the medium and articulate it in a very different way that you've seen previously with other photographers before him. That is James working in street reportage, working in fashion photography, working in studio portraiture, and doing so much more as well. But, sorry, now I lost my thread of where I was going. Let me just rephrase that. So James comes from that history of photography that is a very, very intimate relationship to understanding how Black photographers take on the relationship of that medium to both break this history, but also articulate a new kind of way in which that Black people are being portrayed and being seen by the camera from a non-violent gaze. And I think, something that I've heard quite reoccurring as I was speaking to people yesterday was, oh, these photographs are so beautiful, they're so beautiful. And I think it's very accurate for people to say that they are beautiful because that beauty is also another way of portraying Black people through a different lens and portraying Black people through a different way of also seeing through the camera. And as we're talking about this exhibition coming to the Serpentine and going perhaps back to my own practice, I think, there is an acknowledgement that also has to be made in the way in which that young curators and young researchers are working outside of institutions to actually show this work of James. So I came across James's work in 2012 or 2013 and shared that actually some of the earlier works that I had seen on the internet. And CAS as a platform, I think, and not just CAS, but generally many, many young curators and archivists who are employing the digital space as a way to question the practice of archiving, but also a way to think about facilitating and using these archives by artists to offer another kind of reading of art history, but also another kind of reading of what we understand as the visual canon within photography from a position of Black photographers. That work is being done non-institutionally as well, but I think being brought into the project and working both Ulrich and Lizzie as well, and James, it's a really beautiful way of encountering these two practices that are happening at opposite ends of the spectrum, but then are also very much interconnected with each other in that way. Sorry, I think that's sort of what I'm going to leave this at for now.
Thank you so much, Awa. Maybe James is back, or maybe not. James.
Great.
Could you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, yeah. Ava, do you have a question for James?
I do, I definitely do. So this, it just goes back to what I was presenting about James sort of being a cultural genealogy in your own right. And I'm really interested in thinking about your relationship to younger photographers who are working today, because you have inspired quite a huge generation of photographers working today, both across the African continent and within the diaspora as well. And how do you see yourself situated within that relationship, James?
When I was working, I had that in my heart, but I didn't know how it would work, or whether it will work, or whether I'll live long enough to see it work. But at the moment, I think it's obvious that already at Serpentine, we've got a group of young artists formed out of the exhibition, and they are doing wonders, and they are even using my work to produce more work and learn from it. And whenever we talk about education, whenever we talk about youth, whenever we talk about new ideas, you know, I feel really excited that at least one thing that I have done will inspire somebody, or has inspired somebody like Tyler Mitchell, who, you know, is now greater than I am, and yet he feels proud that he learned something from my work in the 60s. You know, so connection with the youth now. The only thing is that now that I have a voice, because during the 50s and the 60s and the 70s that I worked, I didn't have a voice. Nobody knew about James Barnor. But today that I have a voice, I would give one advice to young photographers from Africa: not to take photography as you know, something that you can just pick up your camera and go and do it and get pictures and sell them or anything like that. But education, education, education. Prepare yourself with strong evidence or you know, foundation for your education. If you take a picture and the picture is very nice and you are being interviewed about it, you must have the reason why you took the picture and the story that will convince anybody else. Now, we didn't, in Africa especially, we didn't get the chance of going to school enough. If we got the chance to go to a secondary school or a university, then you aim to be a politician, a lawyer, a doctor, and you know, one of those higher ups. Photography is like, oh yeah, if I finish now 7, or if I don't go to secondary school, I can be a carpenter, I can be a tailor, I can be even an artist, you know, which is wrong. You have to, now that I have a word, I have a voice, I can advise young photographers to take education as number one. When the education background is firmly fixed, then you can, it will even show in your pictures. When you take a picture, you know why you take it. The picture will speak for itself. You don't even have to say too many words. I remember when I became the first photojournalist or photographer for the Daily Graphic, you go out with a reporter. And the reporter, even though a colleague will be sort of mocking you about, you know, he will tell you what to take this, take that, take this, or even when you finish, he will have to select the picture to be used. Now, if you have the same educational background, and took your pictures, I mean, the pictures will speak so much for themselves that he wouldn't have to, argue, or you don't have to argue about a picture at all. I don't know if I explained myself properly, but this is where I find that as a young, somebody from Africa, somebody that struggled through to get my photography, or my profession, I lacked, and I feel that education should be a priority in the pursuit of our work. Maybe I come back to this education again, but now that I have something to say, I advise that we didn't get any chance at all in education, because I'm listening to other photographers, international or world photographers, and they've got so much to say because they've got the background, they've got so many interests apart from taking the pictures. They have other interests, and it's all boiling down to the upbringing, which concentrates on education first, and then something else. So I'll draw. This may bring in some, other discussions or points to argue about me and education, but it is very important that we are given the chance, or we, now that we are all independent countries, and focus and give enough concentration on education for all our youth. And photographers, are my number one at the moment. I'm interested in other things, but I'm a photographer and now a leader of photography in Africa. The youth are my number one, and education is the point I raise very highly.
Yeah. I have one question for you, James, just going back to the point that you were making. This goes to the audio piece in the exhibition where you're talking about how you were working with lighting in the 1960s, so in the early aspect of your photographic practice, and thinking about, working with the camera and how that camera can portray dark light, and black skin, and lighting black skin through the lens. And I think it's just interesting that you're saying that, but I, to an extent, I feel some of your technical advances and some of your technical prowess in your practice, surely there are also a form of education within photography that is not necessarily institutional, but that is self-taught. And I think, you have an interesting generation of African photographers, such as yourself and your contemporaries, who are very much educated in their practice, even if it's not institutionally rooted.
That's where we have to talk a bit, because my point in education, self-expression, is one thing, and also making notes while you take pictures, making research while you are sort of putting your work together, so that you connect with one another, and even comparing your work with other photographers, which we didn't do. When I left Ghana to come to Britain, before I heard of the Francophone photographers, those who are acclaimed all over. And we lived in Africa. I didn't hear of Ojekere working in Lagos at the same time that I was working in Ghana. All the old ones and the new ones, we never heard of them because we never traveled. We never had the publications about them, so that, not only you're working in your own little Jamestown and that's all, getting to spread your knowledge, getting the chance to know about other things other people what they are going through and what is going on in other parts of the country or the world is the type of education that we missed, or one of the type of, they may be very good because, I happen to have a cousin who showed me or ordered me some photographic books. Otherwise, when you are in your corner, you just take a picture, sell it, get your money, and do your work, and that's it. When we get the chance to travel even within Africa, I bet there are people who have traveled in their short time. They've traveled all around the world in Africa than I did in my 90 years. You see, talking about traveling, and photography, it gives you the tool to travel, but we don't get the chance. And that is another means of education, which is very important. You know what your next door neighbor is doing. You can invite your next door neighbor, have a collaboration of some sort, and even have an exhibition together. While you were, doing, your work, if you ever curated an exhibition between two African photographers from other countries, did you? I doubt if you, curated an exhibition between a Ghanaian photographer and a Nigerian photographer. No, they didn't even know one another. And that's the vacuum which I think should be filled.
This answer related to the young photographer, and also it's almost like Rainer Maria Rilke, giving advice to a young poet, brings us to you, back to you, because of course you are young, you are ever young, and you gave in early days the name to your studio, Ever Young, and it would be great to hear a little bit about that, how you came to Ever Young. And I think I always really wanted to know also what is your secret to be ever young. And then, of course, it would be great to hear about something which is not in the catalog here of the exhibition, MASI, and also in London, because it happened actually after the catalog was printed, which is you actually doing for the first time a Vogue cover. Because we spoke to our friend Ferdinando Verderi, and that we felt that it's urgent that there is a cover of James Barnor for Vogue, and he was very excited, and you came up during the worst moment of the lockdown with a wonderful idea that actually you did the Vogue cover remotely. So it's actually 3 questions. Ever young, and then, of course, this idea of what is your secret to be ever young, and then your most recent shoot, which is the Vogue cover for Vogue Italia, which came out during the exhibition at the Serpentine.
Ever young is, I think I've been blessed by staying young or staying up to 90, which is not very usual, but that's, and it seems as if the name of a studio called Ever Young, with somebody who grows to be 90 and still, instead of raising his feet up and resting, is still working internationally by Zoom on photography. Now, it also has a strong connection with the same educational aspect. I loved, my last year in school, the last year, 1945, when I was in standard 7, I had a teacher who was very nice, and loved by all the students. And he made me the editor of our school magazine. When some secondary schools didn't have magazines, he established a small school magazine. and made me the editor. Now, I think it was because of seeing that I love English, or I love stories, that he made me that, gave me that position. And it wasn't just a position for play. It was a weekly magazine, which will be, written and then copied and shown to the headmaster, who will go through all and sign, and then stuck on the notice board. That time there was no means of, sharing on printing cheaply. So double foolscap paper, what should I say? The prefect, the class prefect was the school prefect. And I happened to sit on the same desk with him. And he had the most beautiful handwriting in the school. And he would copy all what I write, and then it will be posted on the notice board for everybody, the school students, as well as teachers, as well as visitors. In fact, this gave me that promise, that encouragement to go ahead. Now, it was this teacher called Joy at Champon. He was the one who encouraged me. And he, in one of our English lessons, we have English composition, dictation, grammar, and one was comprehension, where one is given a story. The class is given a story to read a few times, and then the questions, or it is read to us, and then after some time, the questions come. And the extract was Idunus Grove. Idunus Grove. I mean, it is through education that we get through this and remember these things and make use of them. Without, standard 7, when I was about 16 and a half, to be given an extract, and at 16, and then when you are 90, you are still remembering and using that piece. You see, Idunus Grove. And the story went like this. Iduna, the beautiful young goddess of the Norsemen, lived in a pretty grove called Ever Young. She had a golden casket full of the most beautiful apples. A hero might come to Idunus Grove feeling that he was growing old. Then Iduna would give him an apple. And as soon as he had eaten it, he would feel fresh and young again. It wasn't surprising that Idunus Grove was always full. And what was still surprising was that Idunus Grove was, the effect of the apple never failed. As soon as the last rosy fruit had been given away, the casket was filled again by an invisible hand. This was a short story about Norsemen, whether true or not, but that was it. That you have to remember, and remember the words, and remember everything about it. And one of the questions was this, how would you caption this or head this story? It's Idunus Grove, but I said Ever Young. I took Ever Young as the idea that I got from the story. In fact, the Ever Young wasn't for me not to grow old, or, but when so many years after, is it 10, 20 years, when I became a photographer, the aim of my photographic training, portrait training, was retouching, making people look younger than they actually were. And that today is Photoshop. By that time, it wasn't Photoshop. We had to use a pencil to retouch all the lines, today's lines that I've got. I'll sit down 20 minutes to 30 minutes on the retouching desk and change the whole thing and print it. I have got one or two examples so that I can show. But that was the aim. That's why I thought about Ever Young, and I went to my school teacher and asked him, do you remember that, when we were in school, we did something like that? He said, yes. He went into his library and brought the book. The same education, if I wasn't interested in education, if I didn't use that chance that makes you read and express yourself, I wouldn't have got the connection to get this beautiful heading, which has lasted, my studio days and even up to now. So this question of education is so important. So that's it. What was the other question?
It's beautiful. And actually, the other question was, talking about Ever Young, is you doing, new work during the Serpentine exhibition and the Vogue cover with Advoa Aboa, which you did for Vogue Italia.
I thought I wouldn't be able to take any more pictures, but as soon as the idea of copying a 1960s shot, which has also become iconic, of Mike Egan, as soon as it was brought to light, we've got a model and we want, to copy what you did 1967 or something like that, came in, more or less, I came to life straight away. The question of, I'm not going to take any pictures again or something got lost now. How do we do it? Because, first, Mike Egan was working for the BBC. Mike Egan was from Ghana, but he was having a spell at the BBC and was very well known. And Drum wanted a feature on him. So asked one Obeng, a writer, to make a story on him. So they contacted me. I went to the BBC studios and I met him and his, colleagues. By all means, I've got to get something from the BBC. So we got one or two shots with the sign BBC on it. And I said, no, let's go out. So we went out to Trafalgar Square. And I took some pictures and I made him climb up to the lion, the big statue there, to get him talking to the lion or getting the news or whatever it was from the lion's own mouth. And I took one, my mind was, even though he was some distance from me, my mind was working on getting that image to represent London. Anytime I take a picture, I like to relate where the person is with where, who he is and some relation. And I got, Mike Egan, BBC, Ghanaian, sort of talking to, and I got 3 pictures. But then a policeman tapped me from behind and said, look, let him come down. We don't do this sort of thing here. But luckily, I had already got my pictures, so I let him come down. As soon as he came down, I said, let's go onto the bus. From the bus, we went to Piccadilly Circus. And it was a new stage altogether, where that monument at Piccadilly, that was my focus. But, then we had all the advertisement Dr. Chivago, you got, and to record these things before they vanish or they are changed is something that the photographer has always got to get in his mind. When I see these things, I get excited, you know. I don't know what to say, you know, within a small space, Piccadilly Circus, there were all the various airline advertisement, Japan airline, there's this airline, and so many things. And using my Egan as the pivot, we recorded all these things. You see, so this was used on drum. You know, so many years after, we want to reproduce it again, and that's something. So, you know, I hadn't met her, but I said, yes, let's have a go. And so from my room, we set everything up, and I had to direct a photographer on the spot, as well as the model. You know, I was talking to all the people, the photographer, the director, the producer, everything. And it was, I remember Lizzie was near me, and even I showed her a picture of me. I mean, I wasn't really thinking that a picture taken of me would be used, but she was the one who set the thing up for me so that everything would go on. And to cut it short, I'm still waiting to meet Ajua personally and hug her, you know. So
it's so interesting. Oh, sorry.
Something else will come again out of that. We don't know. Something else. At the moment, it doesn't seem as if we've finished at all. This exhibition is the beginning of something new or something that we are going to discover more.
I just wanted to say one thing, and then maybe we could hand over to questions. I have no idea what the time is.
Yeah, I think it's good timing to open it up. Yeah.
I just wanted to say it was very interesting you revisiting that particular shot for Vogue with Adua Boa, because I remember early on in the conversation we'd been talking about the image of Mike Egan, the original image, which was taken in 1967, I believe, and you were saying you were recounting what had happened on the day, starting off in Trafalgar Square, moving to Piccadilly Circus. But you were saying you'd also had other thoughts looking at that image from the position of today. You were suddenly remembering that the image was so full of movement. It wasn't just the changing advertisements, but also the traffic moving around Piccadilly Circus. And then, of course, you have the movement of Mike Egan walking down the steps with his arms outstretched. And I thought that was really interesting, that there's so many layers to these images, that from the reasons at the beginning to taking them to how you're also layering on meaning from the position of now. And of course then the restaging adds a whole other element.
That was the time of the mini car, or, you know, so there was even a small mini, you know, in one of the pictures, and then the bus. So when we were doing the Ajua one, I wanted a red bus in it. You know, of course, it was for Italy. Italian Vogue doesn't work with red buses, but because of, you know, my brain and the time I was taking my Egan, I thought I needed the red bus to show where it was. You know, all those things came on working in my mind as if it was yesterday, you know. So it's nice to record changes. Sometimes the time you're doing it, you don't really think about it, but it's some of those things that help to record history and to make notes of things and so on.
James, and actually I saw Adora on Friday, on Thursday in London, and she also really wants to meet you in person. So let's make that happen in the next couple of weeks, and that will then hopefully lead to the next project. But as Lizzie said, it's a great moment to open it up. So I don't know if there are questions or comments, questions for James. Yeah, we've got a question here. If you can have the mic on the left, yeah.
The questions will bring more points and more interest and more development.
Yes, hi James. Thank you so much for your talk. It is very inspiring to hear you talk about your work and your practice. My question is a bit more about color. So in one of the videos we are showing at MASI, you talk about that in Studio X23, even though you could actually print in color, most of the people wanted still black and white. Why do you think that is the case? And how much do you think the impact of color was strong in Ghana when you came back in the 70s? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's good. Color was a new thing. Even in the 60s and the 70s, color was new and fresh and vibrant in Britain, where I left and came to Ghana to establish it. And so Ghana itself, people dress in colorful clothes. Things are so colorful. So, you know, it's something that became a novelty. Everybody wanted color. So as for black and white, it's another thing altogether, because my study of photography and my use of photography, especially in Ghana, black and white had a strong impact on me. And so I had to master the technique of producing good black and white pictures. So that is a basis that you have to, like an artist who becomes a photographer, an artist who, with a strong artistic approach and values to lighting and composition and so on, when he becomes a photographer and picks up a camera, he cannot leave to project the artistic background or training. So if the black and white is there, you know, you do that first. You know, anytime I produce a black and white, I feel as happy as producing color. You know, and color too is changing from the time 1970 or 70 something, when I first developed, I took that picture of the girl, you know, and developed and printed it. And the idea of posing that girl with the bottles was to prove to all the people there, because it was new. They didn't know, the people with whom I was working, they didn't know how things would turn out. I also wanted to prove. So we had to get a starting point or a guide with which we can compare. Say, oh, this is the original picture. We took it here. You know, it wasn't taken anywhere. All of us were here, or it goes into the dark room. And, you know, through a process, this is what comes out of it. You know, so it was a test. If the colors didn't come, then it means I have failed. And I'm sure that there may be one or two people who were doubting whether a black man could do it, or this man who has been employed from England to come and show whether he can do it. And when I did it, you know, I left it for them to decide for themselves whether we are onto something new or not. And that, you know, carried on. And also I started convincing fellow photographers to try and do them, you know, take pictures and bring them. So the color really was new. And even some people started taking these in their studios, where they used artificial light to take the pictures. So, you know, there's some difference there, but we did that as well. And I must tell you, after a year, 2 years, everybody was going for color. They didn't mind how much it cost. It did cost a little more, but everybody liked it. They would like the, but that didn't take us completely away from the strong black and white images which I took.
Now it's interesting, James, when I ask you in relation to the question of color and black and white, when I asked you once in London in the exhibition, we looked at all your photos in the show, and I said, what is your favorite photograph? And you immediately took me to a black and white photograph of the child, the baby. Can you tell us about why that is your favorite photo?
That was the early days in my photography or my career. I had just started the color, the black and white, but I didn't have any. Sorry about the telephone. I just started and moved to a different place from my house where I first, and you know, I was doing my own thing and taking pictures of babies and things like that. And I had the background that I used was drawn by my school teacher, who was then teaching in a college, secondary school or college, and he drew in color for me. So that background was color, but I didn't have any idea about putting a color film in my camera at all. So I did the black and white. Normally, I'll put the baby on a table, you know, put plastic, this thing on the table and put the baby on. But this one, as soon as I did, I was ready, and you know, I just saw it. I call it chance, I call it luck, but attentiveness was another thing, because I'd got to watch the baby doesn't fall from the table as well, you know, because from the table to the ground was, you know, about 3 feet or something like that. So quickly, when I snapped it, you know, looking at it again, he went down and he wouldn't get up again. I definitely challenge any photographer to get a picture like this. You know, we all have our ways of getting luck or some pictures that nobody has done before. But this, I challenge any photographer on earth to take a baby on all fours like that, a 4-month-old baby like that, 5-month-old, nobody. And I mean, I'm taking photographs of so many people. I've taken photograph of Royankra, I've taken photograph of Nkrumah and others. But, you know, a baby on all fours, nobody. That's why I take it to be my best picture.
Thank you, James. And actually, we have several more questions, but I wanted to bring in Willi Spiller, because we are very lucky that great photographer Willi Spiller is here, who has actually worked a lot in Ghana. And he actually asked this question last night, which I emailed you. So Willi, maybe you want to say something?
It excited me. You know, I'd forgotten all about him, not completely, but I'd forgotten about Bill Bell. But when I saw and it was late when I saw it, but when I saw it, you know, another era opened up to me completely. And if I were to, I was answering, and I said, no, let's leave it till another time. So I'm glad I'm meeting him, and we're talking about our old friend.
See Willi now. Can you see him? Yeah.
Hi, James. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Let me first express my greatest admiration for your work. It deeply impressed me, really.
Thank you. Thank you.
It brought back also my memory from working in Ghana. I was asked by a political party. I'm being corrected. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Only you are out of my shot, out of camera. I would like to see you. Oh, move to your left. That's fine. You are now in the center. Just
Hello,
right.
Aquaba. Which is the camera? This one or that one?
Whichever, but you are right in front of me.
Okay. Now, my question is, the thing back there in the corner behind you, is that a tripod?
Hold on, let me look round.
Is that a tripod?
Yeah, I think so. Let's see.
You think so? Because if you're challenging a photographer today, so you must have the tools. I can see.
Yes.
Well, we all saw what you had for breakfast. It's great. So that proves you're still working hard. Are you?
And
Is the video city?
when you play...
Oh.
You have to have a heavy tripod that will support the camera.
What a machine.
So that's why I have that tripod. This is an old MPP I inherited. I inherited from...
It's a Graflex. What is it? A Graflex or something? Do you still find films for this camera?
Oh, this doesn't... It can take a roll film as well.
Ah, I see. So you have an adapter in the back there.
But I only have it as an inheritance from my cousin.
I see.
I have it as a sign of my cousin who helped me onto photography, journalistic photography.
I see. That brings me to the question, what is your next project?
If my life will be spared, just go on talking about the pictures.
You have an obligation to your company name, Forever Young. So you have to go on.
To keep young, keep people's ideas ever young in photography as well as education, and helping the young people to, to go on. There's something else. There are lots of photographers in Accra and in Ghana.
Yeah, many.
Yeah, I wish
I experienced that too.
I wish they will cooperate. I wish they will cooperate more than just be afraid that they will lose their customers or their friends will steal their techniques and, they will be like them or so on. I wish that thing will vanish.
But you are very generous with your advice to young people, like when you said education, that's the key word.
Honestly, I don't fear. I don't run away.
Of course, you don't have to fear nobody. You are challenging people.
Yes, and that goes as far as to the politicians or people who make decisions or how to allocate money or how to use money.
I see.
There's something which has been added to. Civilization flourishes when men plant trees under which they themselves will never sit. If you are afraid that you won't invest in education, then you are losing what civilization will bring to you. But if you are bold and put money in, the future, the time the result will come, you may be dead, but more people will inherit. And that is my life. That is what I live. And I wish that when I am no more, this will be remembered all the time.
I see. Isn't that an African proverb, James, which says...
Problem. I understand.
No,
Greek.
not a problem, a proverb.
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 Oh, yeah, it is our problem.
The African proverb is like this: the grass won't grow faster if you pull on it.
That's it.
But the most...
Sometimes we don't really think very seriously about these things.
Right.
We don't think seriously about these things. Yes, your main question now comes to Bill Bell.
I don't have a question about Bill Bell. I never met him. But when I was working for this political party in Ghana, it was called Reform. It was a presidential campaign I had to cover. Maybe you remember his name, Guzi Tanu. He wanted to become president. Remember Reform Party before Kufuor? That was in 1998. Something like that. Anyway, these people had the heritage of Bill Bell, all the negatives, but they didn't know what to do, and they had no money to establish, like a museum or even a gallery or something. So I came across his work, and I must say I was deeply impressed. So you knew him well.
He was the best photographer in Ghana at the time, because he was already established as an American photographer before he came to Ghana.
Yeah, that's what I learned. But you don't know what happened to all his pictures and negatives?
Now he's, he had a heritage, or he lived together with somebody called F.Y. Sutherland.
Oh, I see.
Together.
It's great to hear that you have such a respect for another colleague. That's rare.
Yeah.
So
he was introduced to me by, I think, James Bailey, the proprietor of Drum.
I see. I don't know.
Either he was the one who introduced him to Ghana.
I see.
Later, I got to be introduced. The two of us were introduced, and I would say perhaps I was the Ghanaian photographer who was nearest to him, because he lived in a separate place at all, and he knew his class. He was a class apart, and nobody matched him. And he gets his assignments. The PRO, James Monson, and they had a class. Except only lucky that I got to know him, and. I remember that when I started the color, after years, he published a book on Ghana called The Road Makers.
I see. Yeah, you mentioned that in your mail.
Yes, when I saw it, I saw the manuscript, the graphic design before I left 59. But I think 60 or 61, when it was published, I saw it in London and bought one immediately. And they are, the book represent pictures that we should all follow in order to, you know, but how much he let the Ghanaians follow him, I don't know, because I left and unfortunately he died. But when I went back and established the color, I had to get the good photographers doing color so that our laboratory will run well as examples of good color pictures will be shown to the public. So I was very close to him. And he invited me to see his own studio, which he built in his house, you know, using the daylight, how he constructed. I think I was the only one. So Afua Sutherland was there. She had her own department, and Bill Bell had his own department. But I was the only one who was close to him.
I see. Okay, James, thank you. I think you answered my question very, very extensively. Thank you very much. I see other people here have also questions, so we have to stop our little private conversation here.
But that is very important to me, to help me to remember my friend and his work.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Remember, he was a wonderful man. He was a wonderful man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you, Billy. And I think we can take maybe one or two more questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, James. It's fascinating. So my question, you talked a lot about education. Hans-Ulrich asked you about your secret. You didn't answer. So to me, the secret is beyond the education you are talking about. It's like the baby picture you said. You are proud, no matter how many education those photographers had, they are not able to capture that moment. So in the exhibition, you had this text at the beginning about planting the tree. I loved what you said about every young, the story about the apple, yes. This invisible hand that never fell. It seems like you planted the seed when you were 7. These seeds manifest to today, which it will go on. You said it's beginning. I understand why you say it's beginning. So the secret here, I have so many thoughts because many things are like connecting dots. Leslie talked about like this picture you revisit decades later, the motion, the movements. So it seems like there's subconsciousness, consciousness. So there's inner seeing, there's outer seeing. You mentioned you have the picture in the mind first, and including the red bus, you waited. So what's the secret, this inner seeing, outer seeing? You mentioned attentiveness. You mentioned a lot about chance. There is chance, but this invisible hand, what's your secret there?
This is it's a mixture of questions, or you know, it will need a lot of answers. But honestly, I haven't got one word to answer this. You know, I haven't got one word to answer this. But maybe there's something else in me, which only God gives, that makes things work for me or make me think of things in different ways from others.
But is it beyond
you know, a scene will be there, but mostly some people will take it one way and others will take it another way. Or, you know, things will happen before us, but we will all think of it different ways. I must have been given something which is different, which cannot be described, and that is how I view my my fellow human beings, how the approach to which I want to use things to help others when maybe I myself am hungry, or I have lived a poor life from the beginning. All the time I've lived a poor life. Now, when God blesses me for my pictures to earn money, then I form a foundation, James Barnor Foundation. Instead of at least buying a helicopter or a car or a big house and enjoying myself, I'm thinking of how the proceeds of my pictures will help more people than me, myself, because I've only got a few years, if at all, to live. I think all these things affect the way I take pictures or the way I live. And that cannot be described. And that always happens once in a lifetime. You can't have all photographers doing that, thinking that way, or all people thinking that they should plant in other people's lives. You see, this is something which is different, and I can't really answer that in one word. But I thank God, and those who see something special in me, they can copy, and when I'm gone, they'll just continue it.
Thank you, James. I think we had one more question. I can't see it now anymore. Do we still have that question, or maybe it answered itself? Great. So I think there could not be a more wonderful conclusion. So thank you so much, James. Another big round of applause for James Barnor.
I have spotted this possibility and bringing it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Lizzie. Thank you so much, Ava.
Thank you.
And thanks again to Tobias and to MASI. And thank you all for being here. Have a great Sunday. Thank you.